The sun had barely risen over the sleepy town of Silver Pines, a place where the morning fog kissed the lake's surface like a forgotten memory. Near the banks, beneath the skeletal remains of what used to be a fisherman's shack, 17-year-old Lila huddled under a thin, tattered blanket. Her bones ached from the cold, but she'd long grown used to that dull gnawing pain. Hunger, too, was a familiar companion. She hadn't had a real meal in 2 days, only stale crusts from a garbage bin behind a cafe and a half-eaten muffin she found near the train station. But even then, she smiled at the sky as the soft wind tangled in her messy brown hair. Still alive, she whispered, her voice cracking with both sarcasm and resilience. No one in town noticed Lila anymore. People passed by her like a shadow that didn't belong. She'd been living on the streets since her mother disappeared one stormy night 6 months ago, leaving behind only a torn photograph and a promise to return. Lila had waited, and waited, until hunger made her legs move, and the city made her heart harden. But it never fully did. She still fed birds crumbs when she had any. Still offered her blanket to an older homeless woman who coughed through the nights. She still believed, in something. Maybe in hope, maybe in miracles, or maybe just in the goodness of people. That morning, as the wind rustled the frozen branches and the lake glistened like glass, Lila heard it. A scream. It wasn't loud, it was muffled, panicked, and almost drowned out by the lapping waves. She froze, her senses sharpening. Help, help me, the voice came again, urgent and raw. Her eyes darted across the water, and that's when she saw it. A man, arms flailing, going under. Without a second thought, Lila bolted from her spot, slipping on the icy mud as she tore off her blanket and shoes. The water was bone-chilling. It stabbed into her like 1,000 knives, stealing her breath. But she pushed forward, stroke after stroke. Her small body was no match for the current, but her will was iron. The man disappeared once, then re-emerged, barely conscious. His head tilted backward, eyes unfocused. He was older, probably in his late 20s or 30s. Well-dressed too, his shirt soaked and clinging to a muscular build. That wasn't someone who usually ended up drowning near a slumside lake. Lila reached him just as he went under again. She grabbed his collar, kicked furiously, coughing and gasping as the weight threatened to drag her down. Her arms burned, her lungs screamed, but she didn't stop. Inch by inch, she pulled him toward the shore. A minute felt like an hour. And just when her body began to give up, her hand reached the edge of a slippery log, and she held on. Dragging him onto the mud, she collapsed beside him, coughing violently. He was unconscious now, pale, lips turning blue. No, 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 breathe. She cried, pounding his chest with both hands. She had no idea what she was doing, but she remembered once seeing a CPR video on a display screen outside an electronics shop. She pressed down hard. Then again. Breathe. She screamed, tears blurring her vision. And then, he gasped. Water exploded from his lungs. He rolled over, coughing and groaning. Lila fell to the ground in relief, panting beside him. You're alive, she whispered, tears trailing down her cheeks. You're alive. The man blinked, still dazed. His eyes met hers for a split second, full of confusion, pain, and something else. Gratitude. But before he could speak, he passed out again. Lila didn't know what to do next. She couldn't call for help, she had no phone. The nearest road was half a mile away. But she couldn't leave him there. Not after saving him. With trembling arms, she dragged him closer to the shack and covered him with her only blanket. Then, soaking wet, she sat beside him and waited. Hours passed. The sun rose higher, but the man didn't wake up. Finally, around noon, he stirred. Where am I? He croaked. You're safe, she said quietly. You fell in the lake. I pulled you out. He looked at her then, really looked. His brows furrowed as he took in her dirt-smudged face, her soaked clothes, the ragged tear in her jeans. You saved me, he asked, disbelief lacing his voice. She nodded slowly. He sat up, wincing. Why? The question hit her like a slap. Why not? She replied. You were drowning. He studied her again, and for a moment, he said nothing. Then he reached into his pocket, nothing. His phone, wallet, everything was soaked or lost. He sighed. I owe you my life. Lila smiled faintly. Just glad you're okay. The man stood, shaky but able. I'm Julian, he said. Julian Cross. That name meant nothing to her. Just a stranger with kind eyes and soaked clothes. She offered him the rest of the muffin she'd saved for herself. He hesitated, then took it gratefully. They sat in silence for a while, watching the water that had nearly claimed him. "You live here?" he finally asked. She shrugged. Nowhere else to go. He didn't press further. But something changed in his expression, like a window opening behind his eyes. He pulled off his jacket, draped it around her shoulders. "You shouldn't have to." The next part happened fast. A black SUV roared down the dirt road. Two men in suits jumped out, shouting Julian's name. They looked terrified. One of them had a tablet, the other a phone. "There you are, sir. Thank God, you've been missing since last night. We've been searching the entire city." Julian stood, and suddenly he looked different. Taller. More powerful. Like someone used to being obeyed. Lila's heart sank. So he wasn't just any man. One of the guards eyed her suspiciously. "Who is this girl?" Julian didn't hesitate. "She saved my life." And then he turned to her, his voice low and sincere. "I don't know who you are, but you changed everything today. Come with me." Lila shook her head, instinctively stepping back. "This is your world, not mine. You belong anywhere you want to belong," he said softly. The guards looked confused. The air was tense. But Julian just offered his hand. And though every part of her screamed to run, to disappear back into the shadows, something in his eyes told her to stay. She reached out, and took his hand. The black SUV drove slowly through the winding streets of Silver Pines, past ivy-draped mansions and gleaming glass towers that seemed to stretch forever into the clouds. Lila had never been in a car like this before. The leather seats were warm, the windows tinted, and everything smelled faintly of luxury. She sat quietly in the back, her fingers fidgeting in her lap. She still wore Julian's jacket over her wet clothes, and despite her shivering, her mind was spinning faster than her body could catch up. Julian sat beside her, drying his hair with a towel one of his guards had provided. His expression was unreadable, calm, serious, with glances toward her that seemed like he was trying to understand a puzzle. The man she pulled from the lake didn't act like a man used to being saved. He acted like a man used to controlling the world around him. And now, for some reason, that world was colliding with hers. The car turned sharply and stopped in front of what looked like a castle made of glass. Lila's eyes widened. The towering structure loomed high, its polished surface catching every ray of the afternoon sun. The gates opened with a soft buzz, and the guards escorted Julian and Lila through a massive marble foyer. This is where you live," she whispered. Julian nodded. "For now. I travel a lot. But this is home base." She didn't know how to respond. The hallway alone was bigger than the whole shelter she used to sleep in before it closed. Chandeliers sparkled above her. Floors were spotless, reflecting their feet like still water. A woman in a crisp uniform approached. "Mr. Cross, should I prepare the guest suite?" Julian turned to Lila. "Is that okay with you? Just for tonight?" Lila hesitated, then gave a small nod. I guess. "Get her warm clothes, food, and anything she needs," Julian said, his voice kind but firm. As the woman led her away, Lila looked back. Julian stood watching her, his hands in his pockets, his brow furrowed as though her presence stirred something deeper in him than he expected. That night, for the first time in months, Lila slept in a bed. A real one, with pillows that smelled like lavender and blankets thick enough to block out the cold memories of the streets. But sleep didn't come easily. Her mind replayed everything. The rescue. Julian's name. The SUV. The suit. The guards. The moment he said, "Come with me." She didn't know why she said yes. Maybe part of her wanted to feel safe. Or maybe it was the way he looked at her, not with pity, but like he owed her something he couldn't explain. The next morning, sunlight filtered through cream-colored curtains. Lila sat up slowly, half expecting to wake up back by the lake, curled up under her ragged blanket. But the room was still there. So was the smell of freshly baked bread drifting through the hall. She found a bundle of neatly folded clothes on the chair. A note lay on top. The rooftop was unlike anything she imagined. It wasn't just a place to stare at the sky, it was a garden in the clouds. Roses bloomed in glass planters, vines curled around marble pillars, and in the center, Julian stood by a small table set for two, overlooking the city. Morning, he said, turning toward her. Sleep okay? She nodded, unsure if she should sit or run. I thought it would be easier to talk up here, he added. No noise. No expectations. She approached slowly, sat across from him. Steam rose from 2 cups of tea. Fresh fruit and pastries sat untouched between them. I looked for you, Julian said suddenly. After I woke up yesterday. You vanished for a moment, and I panicked. I was just scared, she said softly. Didn't know if I belonged here. You saved me, he said simply. That earns you a place here more than most people I know. She looked at him. Who are you, really? He hesitated. I'm CEO of Cross Tech. We make software and defense technology. I'm also the majority shareholder in 6 companies. But none of that matters right now. What matters is that a homeless girl saved a man she didn't know, and didn't ask for anything in return. Lila shrugged. You needed help. He leaned forward. So do you. The words hit her harder than she expected. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't cry. She wouldn't, not here. I want to help you, he continued. Not as charity, but because I owe you. You saved my life. Let me try to change yours. I don't want money, she said quickly. I know, but I want to give you something better, choices. Options. You deserve that. He pulled out a file. Opened it. Here's an apartment. Small, but safe. 6 months of rent paid. A mentor program with one of our youth foundation partners. And if you want, a job, entry level. You won't be handed anything. But you'll earn your place. Your future. Lila's hands trembled as she looked at the papers. Why me? She asked again. Because you reminded me of who I used to be. I wasn't always this man. I grew up in the foster system. Got kicked out at 17. Slept in shelters. I almost didn't make it. She stared. But someone helped me once, he continued. One stranger. And everything changed. I forgot that, until yesterday. Silence stretched between them. Wind ruffled the garden leaves. Okay, she whispered finally. I'll try. His smile was quiet. Real. Good, he said. That's all I ask. Weeks passed. Lila moved into the small apartment, a sunny, second-floor space above a florist shop. She started work as an assistant in the Cross Tech community branch. Her coworkers were kind. The routine was difficult, but she was learning. Filing, typing, scheduling. She hadn't used a computer in years, but she picked things up quickly. In Julian, he checked in sometimes, brought her lunch once, helped her sign up for a night GED program. The city began to feel less sharp, less cruel. One evening, she came home to find an envelope on her table. No return address. Just a folded letter. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She clutched the letter to her chest. She had never felt seen before. Never felt heard. Until now. A few months later, during the official launch of the Lila Grace Initiative, Julian took the stage. This foundation exists because one girl, with nothing, gave everything to save a stranger, he said to a sea of reporters, cameras, and sponsors. She didn't ask for credit. She didn't expect applause. She just acted. That's real courage. And today, she's building her own future. One step at a time. He paused, smiled. Lila, would you join me up here? Gasps rippled through the room as the girl in a simple blue dress rose from her seat, stunned. She walked slowly, heart pounding, to the stage. When she stood beside Julian, the entire room rose in a standing ovation. And in that moment, Lila realized something. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer just the girl who slept by the lake. She was the girl who jumped in. And changed everything. 5,000 words, plain paragraph format. Lila Grace Cross. That's what the official badge pinned to her jacket now read. She wasn't used to seeing her name written so clearly, so confidently. Not on trash bags or police reports, but on office walls and glowing screens. 6 months had passed since that day by the lake. The day she saved Julian. The day her life took a turn she could never have imagined. Now, she worked full-time for the foundation named after her. She managed real cases, young girls and boys who'd been forgotten by the system, lost like she once was. But even in this new life, with clean clothes, warm showers, and a desk of her own, a part of her never truly relaxed. There were nights when she stared out her apartment window, remembering the cold. The hunger. The way people looked through her like she didn't exist. Those memories weren't easy to erase. They weren't meant to be. Because deep down, she knew something others didn't, how easy it was to fall. And how hard it was to climb back up. Julian had become more than just a benefactor. He became a mentor, a friend, and though their relationship was strictly professional in the eyes of the public, there were glances, long, quiet glances, when Lila wondered if he saw her as more than just a girl who saved him. But she dared not hope. Not when she still woke up some mornings half expecting it all to be a dream. One rainy afternoon, Lila was sorting applications in her office when a visitor entered. A woman, early 40s, drenched from head to toe. Her eyes were hollow, her body trembling. Lila stood immediately, offering a towel and a seat. "I'm sorry," the woman said softly. "I don't have an appointment. But I saw the name on the window. Lila Grace." Lila's heartbeat skipped. "Yes," she asked carefully. "I knew a girl once. A little girl, named Lila Grace. She was my daughter." Time froze. The papers in Lila's hand slipped to the floor. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." The woman pulled something from her coat, a torn photo. Water damaged. Familiar. It was the same photo Lila had carried for years. The one her mother had left behind. "I thought you died," the woman sobbed. "I searched. I left for help. I didn't mean to stay away. But things happened. I was in a hospital. They took everything. My memory was gone for months." Lila couldn't breathe. "I saw your name in a news article last week," her mother continued. "And I knew it was you." Julian entered at that moment, umbrella in hand, pausing when he saw the tears in Lila's eyes. "She says she's my mother," Lila choked out. Julian didn't speak. He simply came to her side, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. They ran a DNA test. It was positive. The woman was her mother. Lila didn't know how to process it. Half of her wanted to scream and collapse into her arms. The other half wanted to run. Anger, grief, joy, all tangled in a storm she couldn't control. That night, Julian sat beside her on her apartment couch, silent, offering her the one thing she needed most, his presence. "What do I do?" she asked, voice cracking. "You feel," he said. "Feel everything. Don't run from it." Lila leaned into him then. And for the first time, she let herself cry in front of him. Not as a survivor, not as a symbol, but as a girl, who had longed for a mother, feared she was forgotten, and now stood face to face with a past she never thought would return. Weeks passed. Lila's mother stayed in a nearby shelter, slowly recovering from her years on the street. Lila visited often, but cautiously. Rebuilding trust wasn't easy. There were gaps in their stories, wounds that couldn't be mended with just hugs or apologies. But there was progress. Little things. A smile. A shared coffee. A late-night talk about childhood lullabies. Julian watched from a distance, never pushing, always supportive. He and Lila grew closer in those quiet evenings after work. He showed her the room where he kept the first prototype he ever built as a teenager. She showed him the notebook where she'd begun writing her story, because she believed other girls like her needed to read it someday. And then, one evening, everything changed again. Julian didn't show up for his weekly mentorship dinner. Nor the next morning. His assistant said he'd canceled all appointments. Lila drove to his penthouse. The guards tried to stop her, but she pushed through. She found him on the floor of his office. Unconscious. He was rushed to the hospital. Diagnosis: exhaustion, dehydration, and a suppressed autoimmune condition he had kept hidden for years. The doctor said if he hadn't been found in time, it could have been fatal. Lila sat by his bedside for 2 days, refusing to leave. When he woke, his first words were, "You saved me again." She laughed through her tears. "We're even now." He shook his head. "No, I'll never be even with you." She took his hand. "You don't have to be." Silence filled the room. A different silence this time. One filled with unspoken feelings. "I thought I was saving you," Julian whispered, "by giving you a job, a place. But you're the one who saved me." Over and over. Lila leaned closer. "Then maybe we're both just lost people who found each other." He smiled weakly. "I don't want to lose you," he said. "You won't." And in that moment, Lila realized something she hadn't dared believe for months. This wasn't just a chapter in her life. It was the beginning of a new book.